So when I look into the rooms, and I feel already a kind of Christmas spirit here as well. So after last week's council, I think you are already in a kind of a Christmas mood, and that's necessary for all of us. I want to give you a brief overview about the current issues. First of all, I think politically last week the most important decision was the decision of the British people for their future. Brexit, we have now clarity. That is a positive thing. It's still a mistake that they are leaving, but we have clarity, and that is for sure an end to the uncertainty we had in the last 3 years. We are looking now forward for a quick adoption of the withdrawal agreement from our British friends, and then the European Parliament can act next year. I don't see any obstacles to this. The deal is for us an acceptable deal because we are taking into account the interests of people, first of all, and then also of our interests as European Union when it is about a business. The most important thing is that we have to prepare ourselves now for the talks for next year, so on the trade agreement, first of all. And the message is clear. We will not allow that someone can really import his products to the European single market without respecting our standards, our conditions on the consumer protection side, data protection, whatever. So we will be clear. You can only have access to the single market if you respect our rules. That is then an issue from February on. So the second point is that I want to look back to next week in regard to climate change. For us as EPP, it was a good week. Ursula von der Leyen presented the Green Deal for an ambitious Europe in the fight against climate change, especially having then the Madrid outcome in mind. It was even more important that the European Union gave a clear and strong signal that we are ambitious and we want to fight against climate change. The Madrid Agreement gives us a clear indication that an additional effort on global level is needed for us as Europeans. Again, we want to be ambitious, but the rest must follow. So the rest will be decisive whether we can really tackle and answer the climate challenge on global level. And that's why this activity on global level is even more important than ever before. One aspect was not sufficiently agreed last week, because we as EPP, we think that climate change and the Green Deal has a lot to do with the MFF discussions. You know, people on the Council side cannot ask for an ambitious Europe on a fight against climate change without telling people the truth that this will cost money, that this will produce more need for a sufficient MFF outcome in the debate there. I give you one example. The Prime Minister from Netherlands, Mark Rutte, was very engaged, and I welcome this, in the fight against climate. And he said that his own country and Europe must be more offensive, more ambitious on the fight against climate. And again, I welcome this. But if he is doing so, then he must also tell the people that Netherlands have to be ready for a sufficient MFF on finance for the necessary research we need, and also for financing the burden for especially the countries from the Central and Eastern European Europe. That are about climate. Then, you know, politically today the most important thing is Malta, the debate ongoing in plenary. You know that the Parliament must find a clear position towards Malta. It must be a clear messaging today and tomorrow in our resolution. I think today's discussion gave us already this clarity. I called already last Strasbourg session for political consequences, and then since then Muscat has announced his future resignation. For us, that's not enough. He is ready to accept the political responsibility for what happened in Malta, and we think that he must immediately leave office, having in mind that the Prime Minister has in the Constitution of Malta a very strong position when it is about investigations, ongoing investigations. He is the boss of the prosecutor, he is the boss of the police, head of the police organization, and having all these things in mind, he must immediately leave office to allow the services and the agencies in Malta to do their job in a proper way. I cannot understand why socialists today in the plenary in the European Parliament are only focusing on the investigations and their trust in the investigations. I do the same, so no doubt about this. Together with Europol, with other services, they did a good job. And now, after 2 years, we have finally an outcome. But the socialists are not ready to ask now for further political moves, especially the resignation immediately. That is on the table. And let me be very clear. We have a lot of problems when it is about rule of law in Europe. My party, the EPP, was ready to open the door for an Article 7 procedure against Hungary. So there are a lot of questions on the table, no doubt about this. But the Maltese case is a unique case. We have a murdered journalist, and this journalist was writing pieces and articles in regard to mafia state connections. That was her job. And due to her job as journalist, she was killed. And now we have obviously a link to the political class in Malta. This is the first time that this is now on the table, that this happened the first time. That's why it's a unique case, and I hope that the socialists and others will recognize this and will do their steps. I tell you that I'm happy that today the European Commission was very clear. So Jourova and Reinders was very clear on the will of the European Commission to ask for a fair assessment and investigation, an independent investigation, and to focus on this and to observe what will happen. That was a clear statement. And I tell you, we didn't have such a clear statement in the last years in regard to Malta. So in the previous Commission, we didn't have the same activities from the Commission side to be outspoken on Malta. Today we have a good development. This was not the case in the last 5 years. And finally, having in mind that this is a unique case, but we have all over Europe problems, I want to remind you again that it was the EPP who presented during the election campaign as first political party in Europe a binding rule of law mechanism for Europe, where we have an assessment, a regular assessment about all countries in the European Union, not only East or West or North, South, all countries, a yearly assessment, an independent assessment about whether the rule of law mechanism and the ideas behind are properly implemented. And then finally, two more general things. First of all, this week is also the week of the Sakharov Prize. You know, we have chosen a very prominent case. This case shows again that the European Parliament and also we as a political family, as EPP, we stand up for the ideas of Sakharov about our basic values of freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and that is under pressure also what we see now in China. And finally, I want to congratulate Klaus Johannes. He will get the Karlspreis this year, the most important European prize in the European Union, and he deserves it. He did a great job to bring Romania to a clear pro-European direction, and now he also managed that with his re-election, he showed that the Romanians wants to live in a modern, in a non-corrupt country, in a European country, and that is a great success for him personally and also for Romania.
We'll now take your questions.
It's Georg van Herk for Channel 4 News. It's a question on Brexit. You talked about it being Brexit clarity now. But is there a risk with the British government saying they're not going to allow an extension of the transition period beyond 2020, that if you back the deal when we get the final vote, presumably in January in the European Parliament, that you're in effect backing a hard Brexit, you're backing no deal at all, because there's every possibility of no deal being achieved by December 2020?
After overcoming the first cliff edge, the next is ahead of us, so that's obvious. I would say for the moment we need clarity on what are the responsibility, the task ahead of us, and that is now guaranteed. Again, we regret the outcome of Brexit. We regret that Britain is leaving, but we respect it and we have to deal now with it. And again, we have now a government with a clear majority in the parliament that is creating stability. Whether you like it or not, it is creating stability. And that is what I really want to welcome. And for January, for the next weeks, the big question on the table is what will be the concrete mandate for the European Commission to start negotiations with our British friends. And again, we want to have stable relationships. Probably such a new cooperation between the European Union and Great Britain can also give us a kind of an orientation for other neighbours in our neighbourhood, for those who don't want to join the European Union, but where we have an interest to have a close link and a close cooperation. It can be also a kind of a role model for the future way of dealing with our neighbourhood. That's why I would see, for the moment, having all the tragedy in mind, having all the negative impact in mind, I would say today, let's make out of the development now also an opportunity. Let's do it now. Let's do the job now. Let's create certainty for our business sector and also for our citizens that is ahead of us, and that should be the guiding line.
But within 11 months?
Well, you cannot... We have no mandate on the table, and without a mandate, you cannot say how long it will take time to finalize the talks. We have a totally new field in front of us, because the first time we are discussing with an EU country a free trade agreement, and that never happened before, and that can be easy. That can be difficult. Nobody knows it. For us, it's important to clarify from the very first moment on the criteria. And I said it in my statement. I said very clearly that I think the EPP will not accept a trade agreement where we allow lower standards for our consumers than we guarantee inside of the single market. That is a precondition for all the talks. And London must be aware about this. If you want to have access to our market, you have to respect our criteria for producing and selling products.
Next question there.
Hello, Estonian television, Eppehand. You will elect soon Ombudsman of European Union. Who of the candidates has the support of your group and why?
Well, the Ombudsman is a very important decision. It's a bridge builder between citizens and the European institutions. That's why, for us, it's an important decision this week. And we as EPP Group, we will have not one candidate. We will have a free vote on the candidates. I think that is not at all a party political question. That is not a question where EPP has interests or Renew has interests. We have different candidates on the table. Everybody has positive and negative sides, and everybody in the group will make up his mind and will decide voluntarily.
Another question there.
Monsieur le Président,
good morning. Officially, the European Union opposes Turkish military oppression in Syria. That is certainly the view of the European Parliament. According to our information, however, Turkey has plans in the Afrin region funded by the European Union. So how would you react to that news? Will you look into the matter? Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. We have to check that such news. I was not aware about such speculation, such rumors, but if this is on the table, I think we have to check it. For the European Union, it's clear this military activities in the north of Syria is against international law. It's not supported by the European Union. And that means that the European Union cannot be in any way linked to this, so we cannot finance any project in this area. On the other hand, I also must underline that we have to find, together with all acting partners in the regions, a sustainable long-term solution. So one aspect is northern Syria, but the rest is also under concern, and that's why Europe has to be engaged in the region generally to find a long-term sustainable solution.
We have time for one last question here.
Hello, Mr. President. I am with the Romanian News Agency, Agerpress. I would like to ask you about the new independent rule of law mechanism that you have spoken of before. How optimistic are you that it will be in effect for the next MFF? Because the member state doesn't seem so favorable to it. I mean, they don't want to lose money because they have infringed the rule of law. Thank you.
When we talk about rule of law, it's first of all a very basic thing for what we call the European way of life. So what defines us to be Europeans, and their rule of law is a basic principle, how we organize a state with the independence of judiciary, for example, the independence of a free media, that are basic things, fight against corruption, basic things. And again, that's why we see a big need, that we need an independent yearly assessment of all countries. We have to find a way. In the last 5 years, it was mainly also occupied by party political discussions. And we have to find a way to depoliticize it, to make it neutral, the assessment about what is happening. And also to clarify that this question is not only a question for Romania, where we have still the supervision mechanism, but it's also a question for the rest of the European Union. Everybody has a challenge and an ongoing task on the table. And that's why we strongly insist in this. And you know that the proposal of the Commission is linking the issues. So to spend money in a proper way should be linked to the rule of law. I think from a taxpayer's point of view, in Romania, taxpayers, in Germany, in Spain, they ask us to do so. They tell us, sorry, I want to have the guarantee that my money as taxpayers is spent in a proper way, is spent in a non-corrupt way. That is a basic consideration from a citizen's point of view. That's why our idea is to bring it alive. And I think those countries who are refusing this should really consider twice whether they will really refuse this or not, because everybody should immediately say, okay, I'm welcoming this because I have no problem. Hopefully, nobody has a problem with this. We have another element. One is to bring it alive during the MFF discussions, or the horizontal MFF discussions. But the second thing is to strengthen now our European prosecutor. We have now a European prosecutor in office. It's a Romanian lady. We are very proud of this because we respect her very much. We count on her. But we have now to create the good conditions for her work. So she needs staff. She needs the capacity really to do their job on European level, to fight against misuse of money and against corruption. All these elements, these two elements, prosecutor and MFF, are crucial for us.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas, and see you back in 2020.
All the best.